It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this important training on addressing exam malpractice and fostering integrity in our educational institutions. The significance of this topic in education cannot be overstated. Exam malpractice not only undermines the credibility of our educational system, but it also jeopardizes the future of our students. And as educators, we have, a profound responsibility to ensure that our students are not just knowledgeable, but also they have they are ethical and honest individuals. So every teacher on this call, if you're joining via Zoom, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, or if you're on Twitter, you are a crucial part of this mission. And together, we can create a culture of integrity and excellence in our schools. And that's the aim of today's workshop. So to start, I would like to take a moment to introduce the opening remarks by Chief Dr. Yomi Otubela, the esteemed president of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools in Nigeria. Chief Otubela's commitment to advancing education and his leadership in this partnership with Africanness have been instrumental in making this workshop a reality. So please join me with a very big round of applause and reactions wherever you're joining from. Please join me in welcoming Chief Yomi Otubela. Thank you for his opening remarks.
Excellent morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here today to address you on the welcome address for the teachers' workshop organized by the partnership between the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools and the Africanness.uk. I want to sincerely welcome you all and appreciate all the speakers, educators, administrators, and distinguished guests who had taken time out to be here today. I welcome all the National Executive Council members of NAPS, as well as the members of the Board of Trustees. I equally welcome members of the Africanness UK. We appreciate you for your partnership over the years. I am delighted to welcome you all to the virtual teachers training workshop organized by the NAPS and Africanness UK with the theme Promoting Integrity, Strategies for Mitigating Examination Malpractice in Schools. I am honored to address this esteemed gathering of educators who played a crucial role in shaping the future of our world through education. Integrity is the cornerstone of any educational system and the key to ensuring a fair and level playing field for all students. In recent times, the issues of examination malpractice has been a growing concern, threatening the credibility and integrity of our educational institutions. It is imperative that as educators, we take proactive measures to combat these menace and uphold the principles of honesty, transparency, and accountability. This training workshop provides us with an invaluable opportunity to share best practices, insights, and strategies for effectively mitigating examination malpractice in our schools. Through collaborative efforts and a collective commitment to promoting integrity, we can create a culture of academic honesty and ethical behavior among our students. I urge all participants to actively engage in discussions, show reactions, exchange ideas, and explore innovative solutions to address the challenges of examination malpractice. Let us work together to instill a sense of integrity and ethical values in our educational system, thereby fostering a generation of young leaders who uphold the highest standard of moral conduct. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to each and every one of us here. May this seminar be a source of inspiration and empowerment as we strive to promote integrity and excellence in education. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir, for that Wonderful opening remarks. That is exceptional. That's great. Thank you so very much. I think we're charged with that great opening remarks, and that sets the tone for today's training. Absolutely brilliant remarks. Thank you so much, sir. So next, I would like to introduce someone also very special to us, who has joined us today for this training. She has over 2 decades of experience in the UK's educational landscape in terms of teaching. She's a seasoned educator and advocate for quality education. She started a career as a French teacher in London, and she has risen over the years to her current roles as the Director of Learning and Assistant Ed Teacher, consistently championing holistic students' development and teaching excellence. Prior to relocating to the UK, she completed a youth service corps in Benue State in Nigeria. So she is full-fledged Nigerian, where she taught French and English in comprehensive schools in Ankara. She holds dual MA degree in linguistic and sociology of languages, alongside with an MA in educational leadership and management from the University of Nottingham. She's accredited as an advanced skills teacher and a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. And she has worked in different school settings in the United Kingdom as a classroom practitioner, an examiner, an advanced skills teacher, a director of learning, an assistant ed teacher, a trust more able lead, and a curriculum lead. Fantastic. Our extensive leadership experience in various roles has made her a fantastic keynote speaker for our training session today. And she has completed a lot of leadership programs, from the Investing in Diversity program to the Equal Access to Promotion program to the Confidence Executive Leadership program that is being run by Fig Tree International Limited in the United Kingdom. Join me today to welcome Ms. Lovette Monye as our keynote speaker. Over to you, Lovette. Wonderful, wonderful bio.
Great. Thank you very much, Bumi. Thank you so much. It's so humbling, so humbling. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Good morning to you, wherever you have joined us from. Whether you are here in the United Kingdom, or you've joined us from overseas, or you're joining us from Nigeria, this workshop is for you. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. We are so delighted to have so many of you joining us this morning. As educators, we are making a difference in the lives of the children and young people we are working with. It may not always be obvious, but we are. So the focus of today's workshop has already been mentioned. It's about promoting integrity, strategies for mitigating exam malpractices through social and emotional learning in African education, with particular focus on Nigerian educational system. So I really want to say a big thank you to to Chief Yomi, because the speech, his opening remarks resounded with me and resonated a lot with me. Examination malpractice is not a new phenomenon in education globally, no matter the establishment or the country we are in. The way it occurs, however, is different from one country to another, from one educational school setting to another, even in the same country. Now, I'm going to draw a lot from a paper that Bumi kindly shared with us. It's a paper written by Okoli and others, published by the International Journal of Educational Development in March 2019. This paper is titled Reclaiming Education, Rising Above Examination Malpractices and Its Contextual Factors in Nigeria, focusing on Nigerian system of education. In that paper, Okoli and others, and they highlighted in detail key factors surrounding examination malpractices in the Nigerian educational system. Based on structured questionnaires they carried out with over 700 participants. Actually, they did it with 795 participants. That's a lot. Among those participants were parents, caregivers, university lecturers, exam invigilators, university students, secondary school students, and teachers. According to the paper, several factors contribute to the prevalence of examination malpractices in the Nigerian education system. The major factor, however, is the value the Nigerian society places on the acquisition of certificates over skills and competencies. The paper also pointed out the role parents and caregivers play in aiding the process of malpractice, directly or indirectly, intentionally or unintentionally. Now, the relationship between teachers and their students, which sometimes can lead to overfamiliarity, was equally cited as a contributing factor to examination malpractices in the Nigerian educational sector in that paper. As a teacher, I have had the privilege over the years of working with children and young people in UK maintained secondary schools, especially the most disadvantaged. I understand our role as classroom practitioners in helping our students develop, thrive, flourish, and fulfill their potential, regardless of their background, their social status, or starting point. However, in my practice, I have noticed that cultivating a climate of high expectations, which I do, incorporating retrieval strategies into my lessons, making sure that my students are aware of and understand assessment criteria, teaching them strategies for tackling exam questions, and helping them to develop independent learning skills. These strategies have had positive impact in terms of my student outcomes, not only in my subject area over the years, but also in the areas I have had the privilege of line managing as a school leader. I have always believed that teaching is not just a profession, it is a vocation. We are making a difference and we're changing lives. Exams are important. We all know that. Exam results are often pivotal in determining whether or not our students have acquired the knowledge and skills we taught them. But we can't forget the fact that those results are also used to judge us as teachers, to judge our school's performance. We use them to inform planning and further intervention as appropriate to ensure that our students are achieving as they should, but not just academically, but holistically, as a whole human being, a whole person. Academic achievement is important, but we look at a whole person. We are all in the middle of our GCSE and A-level exams here in the United Kingdom, and I believe in Nigeria as well. So the key questions we should be asking ourselves are, could developing skills and competencies in students be a possible way of minimizing or curbing exam malpractices in the Nigerian education system? How can we mitigate exam malpractices and promote integrity in Nigerian educational settings? So, tighten your seatbelts, because in today's workshop, we will examine these questions and many more in detail, focusing primarily on the Nigerian educational system. We will look at what exam malpractices are, how to identify them, the why of exam malpractices, the legal and ethical framework around exam malpractices, and strategies to mitigate them. We will explore strategies for teaching enhanced memory and recall, the brain and how it works, how to avoid information overload for students, especially the 11 to 18, the ones I work with, dealing with anxiety and panic attacks during exams, as well as how do we develop and cultivate their social and emotional well-being. So let's look at the icebreaker. if that's all right. We have 2 questions for you in our icebreaker. What do you understand by exam malpractice? Please tell us, use the chat to let us know your thoughts. And what does that look like in your school setting? Thank you. I can see some answers coming up. Cheating in exams. Thank you, Flora. So we're looking at exam malpractice. What do you understand and what does that look like in your setting? Tutors selling exam papers. Again, we talked about the relationship between the teachers and their students. Thank you very much, Joy. Thank you. Going against the rules and ethics of exams. Thank you, Victor. Giving your script to another student. Thank you so much, Esther. Any action that is contrary to the rules of an examination. Thank you so much, Issy. Going against the rules and regulations guiding a particular exam. Thank you very much, Sunday. Giraffing in the exam hall. I've never heard that before. Thank you, Ugwa. Giraffing in the exam hall. Wow. In a school setting, it could look like a student bringing illegal materials to help them in their exams, like written answers on a ruler or even on the palms of their hands. Thank you so much. We're going to address all that in this workshop. Thank you, Flora. Cheating in exams refers to doing anything that goes against the rules of examination. Thank you so much, Chinwe. Illegal action that students take during their examinations to try to make good grades by cutting corners. Thank you, Olamide. Exam malpractice refers to any unethical or illegal behavior that gives a student an unfair advantage during an examination. This includes cheating, such as using unauthorized materials, copying from another student, impersonation, and collusion. It undermines the integrity of the whole process and devalues the qualifications obtained. I couldn't agree with you more, Kat. Thank you for that insight. Malpractice is the act of using unpermitted external aids in the exam. Thank you so much. We experienced such recently in my school when a year 6 student, and she was suspended for a week. See, it even starts in primary school, not just secondary and not just university. So it's actually almost, I don't want to use the word pandemic, but it's a phenomenon that needs tackling. Thank you. Going against the rules and regulations binding an examination pertaining to school settings. Thank you so much, Techno. So it keeps coming on. Thank you so much for engaging with us and answering those questions. Dr. Yomi, examination malpractice refers to any unethical or dishonest behavior by students or faculty members during exams or other assessments. It can include cheating, plagiarism, unauthorized communication, use of prohibited materials, or any other act that compromises the integrity and fairness of the examination process. Dr. Yomi, thank you so much, sir. There were some really key messages you sent in your speech that resonated with me, and we'll be coming back to them. Thank you, sir. Grace impersonation, thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next part, the next session of this workshop, and then I'll hand over to Malia and Bumi. Thank you. Thank you so much for engaging with the icebreaker questions, very insightful comments. Thank you.
So I'll take over from here. So you must have seen a video that was a promotional video delivered by Sophia, who's one of our team leads of education. And this actually explained how exam malpractice looks like. So we'll just replay it once again, just to refresh for those who've watched it already, and the ones who haven't had a chance to watch it, they could get the information related. So just give me a second. I'll try playing this.
So the date was sometime in the late 90s. I was only a teenager then, and I was getting ready to write my entrance exam in preparation to go into the university. I was placed in an examination center known as the Special Center. Now, that was my first encounter with exam malpractice. Fast forward several decades on, it is so shocking that exam malpractice is still prevalent in our community today. Now, the issue is not what is being done or what has been done, because a lot has been done by the examination bodies and the way the exams are now being run. However, maybe it is time for us to take a different look. It is time for us to think of a different approach, because this issue is still prevalent, it is still endemic, it is still going on. Maybe we need to look at how exam malpractice affects the students, the teachers, the parents, the community as a whole. What does it do to our psyche? What does it do to our mental well-being? My name is Sophia Vonlen, and I'm leading this training today on exam malpractice. It's important to understand that exam malpractice is not just one event and then it happens and everybody goes home. No, the impact is far-reaching. And I'm going to talk about some of the impacts and the effects it can have on the student, the teachers, our society as a whole. The first impact of exam malpractice is the degradation of our educational standards. When exam malpractice is prevalent, when cheating is prevalent, it means that our educational standards are reduced to almost nothing. The reason for that is cheating and the malpractice and things that happen with the malpractice, be it the leaking of the papers, the bribery of the exam officials, or a student cheating through some means, or even impersonation of an exam candidate. All of those things, all of those actions undermines the value of our education system. And that is why exam malpractice is a problem. The second thing to consider when we look at the impact of exam malpractice is that where cheating is rampant, it erodes the credibility of our institutions, not just nationally, but also globally on the international stage. It would mean that the degrees and the certificates that come from our schools are not recognized internationally. I'll give you an example of myself. I graduated from university with a second class upper with a very high GPA. But by the time I moved abroad, my certificate was devalued to a third class. Now, as a person, I worked really hard in school, and that really demotivated me at the time, because I thought, my goodness, I've worked so hard, but because our schools are not recognized globally, and even when they're recognized globally, there are issues of exam malpractice and issues of corruption, my degree was devalued to a third class. And that's something that we need to think about, how we shift that, so that we don't come to a point where our certificates are never recognized in any setting. So where there is exam malpractice, the third thing that it could result in is unfair advantages and disparities. It creates an uneven playing field. So you think about student A and student B. Student A has worked really hard, has been honest, and then student B has cheated. And so immediately there is that disparity. And for student A, that student could become demotivated and uninterested in doing more with their education just because they know what has happened and that someone else has cheated and has gotten even better results than them. So that disparity is something that a lot of students have to grapple with when exam malpractice is prevalent. The next thing to consider is the impact on the quality of our workforce as a nation. You see, where we have the prevalence of malpractice, it means that the people in the workforce, the graduates that come into the workforce, are not skilled workers. And so that doesn't just affect one company, we're looking at the economy as a whole. And so exam malpractice is not just one student, one school, one teacher, or whoever else is involved in it. It is something that, when it's so rampant, it affects every facet of our society. The final impact I want to look at is that of psychological stress. So for a student who might not be interested in cheating and might just want to work hard and do well on their own merits, they might experience a lot of anxiety and become worried, knowing that their hard work is not enough. And you see, as a society, we shouldn't become a society that does not recognize hard work, that does not reward hard work. So exam malpractice is a real issue and is an issue that affects every area of our lives. And we know that education is the bedrock of our society. And if our education is not good quality, then where lies the hope for our society?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, colleagues, I'm back. We're back again. And this time around, we're looking at mitigating factors. How do we preventing measures strategies that we can use and employ in our schools to curb exam malpractices? The first point that came to my mind as I was mulling over this was staff training. Now, in my role as a school leader and also in my practice, I have always enjoyed professional development opportunities given to me to thrive in my career. And I am a developer. I develop staff and I train staff. So staff training is crucial. It's important that we train our teachers, our staff, that everybody in our school setting is aware of and familiar with the awarding body's guidance, instructions for the conduct of exams. Now, in the Nigerian system, we use WAEC. So we have to be familiar with the guidelines released by WAEC, and also in your own country, find out who the awarding bodies are. Here in the UK, we have the JCQ. So we have to familiarize ourselves and make sure that our staff, our teachers are aware of the examining body's conduct of exams for each of us in our subject areas and for each paper. In some subjects, they take about 2-3 papers. Like in my subject area, we have 4 papers. And I know in Maths, English, they have more than 2 papers as well, including non-examination assessment. So I'm looking here, I'm talking about creative arts subjects, performing arts subjects, where they have coursework. And in my subject area, we have speaking exams. In English as well, we have speaking exams. They're what we consider as non-examination assessment, but there are guidance to the way we conduct these exams. We look at the examination rooms and that they are set up in accordance with the regulating body's guidance as well. So the staff training here, for me, it's about educating staff, getting them to familiarize themselves with the guidance and to know exactly what each paper entails and how the professional body stipulates that those papers should be taken under which conditions. The next point for me is about, in terms of preventive measures, it's about the students we're working with. And Alice is going to talk more about that in her session. Talk to your students. Help them prepare for their exams by checking that they know what's going to happen and what is expected of them. Let them know items they are not allowed to bring into the exam room in this age of technology. Some of us have our mobile phones in our hands because our wristwatches. No, let them know they cannot bring in watches into the exam hall and mobile phones. And the pencil cases have to be transparent. Again, follow the regulations of the professional body you're working with. When it comes to talking to your students, as a classroom teacher, that is what we do all the time. We're not just talking to them in terms of giving them lectures, but supporting them and answering any questions they have. One thing I find very beneficial, it's about going through the examiner's report with my students for each of the papers they will sit, because it's the same thing, the same papers for the same subjects. I don't mean the same questions, obviously, but they have the same paper, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. So we look at the examiner's report. And the examiner's reports are very detailed in terms of how students have answered each questions in the previous year and how the examiners expected them to answer the questions. In paper 4 in my subject area, for example, which is a written paper, there is what we call a 40-word essay, a 90-word essay, and a 150-word essay for GCSE students. It's about showing them exactly the expectations and the criteria for answering those questions so they don't waffle and they don't go off tangent. And also it's about calming their anxieties and doing lots of practice in lessons with them to prepare them, not 2 days leading towards the exam, but in months. Start from the early years, from JS1, here we call it year 7, and then including that gradually into the lessons and building their confidence as they go up. The next thing for me is parents. They are our partners in this business. We don't work alone with the students. We work with their families. We work with their local communities. We work with their parents, with their caregivers. We have to know if we find ourselves in a school setting with very affluential parents who believe in the power of money to buy anything they want, we have to know how to mitigate that. And when they give us gifts as teachers, which they do, appreciation gifts, we have to understand, try to understand whether there are any other intentions behind the gifts. You know what I mean? Like when you say, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. Are there any intentions behind the gifts, or are they just genuine gifts to say thank you for helping my child thrive? Okay, so we have to be careful in accepting gifts from our parents. Engage with them, provide guidance on how they can support their child at home before and during the exam period. Some of our children, like I said earlier, been working in this country for over 20 years now. I've worked with disadvantaged children. Some of our students don't have the space at home to study. Again, as a school, how can we support them? And we do that all the time. We provide homework clubs at school. We have extended opening times. The library opens before school starts and closes after school hours so they can study. But some of our parents genuinely want to support their child at home. They may not know how. And again, with changes in exam specifications, they may not understand all the technical nitty-gritties that we, as well as we do. So here, it's where we have to support them by giving them the information they need, not the exam papers, but information they need to help them support their child, like a study timetable. How can they support their child in creating a study timetable and giving them the space to study? Okay. The next part for me, again, is the confidentiality of exam materials when it comes to do with invigilators. Some of us in our schools are exam officers. Some schools have special people dedicated to that role, appointed for that role. Not all schools are financially buoyant to have exam officers. So you have teachers acting as exam officers or senior leaders acting as exam officers. No matter who the exam officer is, the confidentiality of exam materials is important. Nobody should have access to the exam materials until the day of each exam. When the exam is opened, unsealed in front of the students when they are about to take the paper. Again, training our invigilators. You can see I'm really up and about training. Training our invigilators, unraveling any misconceptions they may have or the way they have done the invigilated in the past and they want to bring it to the present, listening to them, to their concerns, but also addressing any issues they may have and informing them about best practice, what their role is. They cannot see the exam papers, obviously, on the day before, but they need to understand about being vigilant and proactive throughout the exam season and understanding how to report concerns or any observations, anything they may have observed and noticed in the examination room. Who do they report concerns to? That needs to be made clear to them. So there is clarity of communication. The chain of communication is clear to everyone. The invigilators training, I had one recently in my current school setting when I requested for my invigilators to be trained, and the school was willing to support us with that. I trained the invigilators, sharing with them the regulations from the awarding body and from JCQ in terms of their role and then how this particular exam should be conducted. They were very pleased. The exam was well conducted. They were happy. It's not about them being happy, it's about clarity. They understood their role. So training the invigilators for me is important. Now, again, linking it to the context where you are. The bottom line here is for you to understand who your professional bodies are. So if it is WIEC or any other awarding body you're working with, whether it's a Cambridge IGCSE exam you're following, please find out their guidance and their conduct for the exams you are conducting at your center and follow that guidance. Make sure everyone from the head of the center to the invigilator, everyone is aware of expectations. That clarity of communication needs to help. And the teachers, they cannot and shouldn't see the exam paper beforehand. They shouldn't. Again, and if you're a teacher and you're involved in creating exam papers, there is an element of confidentiality. And you cannot share whatever questions. It's just, I can't stress on that confidentiality aspect enough, because over here, they actually make part of the guidance is you sign a paper, a confidentiality paper. You cannot share, not even to your class. You cannot use your knowledge to advantage your students and disadvantage other students. Neither can you trade information with teachers or with parents. So the element of confidentiality is about promoting integrity in the system so that these exams run smoothly and no student is a disadvantage. We put a lot of emphasis on the results, which is fantastic. Oh, they had this A star, yes, but what about the child? How do we prepare the child to get them to be whole human beings, not just, are we training them to negatively or are we preparing them positively? I'm going to allow Alice to deal with that in her session and show us exactly how to prepare our students. So those are my takes on preventive measures. And there is a link there I put, if Bumi can share that please in the chat, about information, sharing information with candidates, the documents. I know it's about JCQ, but there are nuggets you can take that could apply to your own school setting and that we can use. Thank you so much. I will hand over now to Malia. Any questions, please pose that to the panel. Thank you.
So what I'm going to be thinking about is the perspective of the student and the teacher, and and thinking about how we can give our students confidence about what they're doing, how they're learning, giving them the best opportunity to succeed. So my aim is that if they have confidence in themselves, and teachers know that their approaches are backed by the latest research that they know to be successful, that belief in themselves will maybe mitigate them wanting to resort to other means. So I'll be looking at the three main brain functions involved in learning, revising, and retrieving the information under pressure. So the first, the one in pink, really is about how we teach our students so that they start paying attention, selecting the relevant information that will be processed and hopefully retained. Then we look at how they can independently study and use the information that you've taught them. So the information transfers from the working memory into the short-term into the long-term memory. And then we look at how we can bring forward that information when it's needed in an exam quickly and under pressure. And then hopefully the more they practice these approaches, the more confidence they gain into using them, and the belief that they can perform when they're needed. So we'll go on to the next slide. So, oops, and hang on a second. So there is a lot of information out there about how to study, but these are strategies that are backed by evidence. And I've only included approaches with a lot of research behind them to show that they work. However, the science of learning doesn't provide an exact prescription for what to do in every situation. There is no one way to study that will work for everyone. So I can't say simply do X for a specific amount of time and the students will get a top grade. As you know, that's not how learning works. So what you'll do is have a look at these and get students to try things, know that it's based on decades of evidence, and then hopefully the students will work out what works for them best. So research tells us it's not necessarily how much or how long someone studies, but how they study that's important. Memory is obviously a key part of revision. So if you can access the right information at the right time, knowing that long-term memory's got no limits to capacity, that you should be able to keep as much in there as you want. Short-term memory, approximately 7 things. We lose it quite quickly, so we do have to rehearse that information to make it stick. So how do we do that? Well, we'll run through some processes. So if we have a look at the next slide, on the one before that, so the slide before that, the most important thing, and it's of course very obvious, is about asking the students to pay attention, because of course you can't remember anything you've not paid attention to. So you can do a little to let them try this and realize how much they really do have to pay attention. They can't just be in a class and expect to absorb it. You can do a little practice with them, and you can have some kind of song lyrics and ask them to really pay attention to it while someone is saying these song lyrics that they may not know, and then see what they can remember. See, can they draw it? Can they remember any words? What can they do? And then try it again. This time ask them to maybe just I don't know, drift off, kind of look around, not really pay attention, and then this time with these lyrics, how much do they remember? And just if they can, in just a few minutes, if they can notice the difference with them paying attention, and then just extrapolate what would the difference be in a whole lesson, in a day, in a week, just so they're aware of how important that it is to pay attention. Now, if we are going on to the next slide, I try and make sure that children and young people do understand the difference between kind of learning and memory, and that they do need to do more than just kind of learn something once or read something over, that they actively have to maintain and strengthen the neural connections in their brains, otherwise they fade away. So learning is about the creation of the the connections, and memory is about the strengthening of these connections. How do we improve their attention? If we go on to the next slide, Malia, please. So the strategy that students report using, particularly when they're studying, are often not the most effective learning or revision ones. And a big study looked at the most popular student revision strategies. They are rereading, flashcards, highlighting, note-taking, and outlining, plus a lot of cramming. Now, some of these aren't bad, but are often used in a way that leads to less learning than other strategies. And the important thing is that they feel like they're working really well, and students are confident they're learning. And then they find themselves disappointed when they take the exam and realize they didn't do as well as they thought they should, or didn't know as much as they thought they did. So if we look at rereading, which is the most common technique for revision, it's the most kind of common form of study that gives revision its name. So just literally looking at the thing to learn again. The problem with this is that we mistake our ability to recognize something for our ability to recall it. And recognition and recall are different psychological processes. Recognition is a much easier task. All you have to do is look at something in your environment and generate that correct feeling of familiarity. It's like when you look at your notes and think, oh, I'm sick of looking at these. But in your exam, you don't get marks for things being familiar. You get marks for recalling the relevant information and using it to answer the question. So even powerful feelings of familiarity don't guarantee that you can recall the information. So if we look at the next slide, so students process the information in their working memory. If it's too much, it'll be lost. So there's the whole kind of cognitive load theory there. So we don't want to give them too much all at once. We want to give them a bit, let them process it, do some activities with it, think about it, and consolidate it rather than all too much at the same time. Consolidate and retrieve. So if we look at the next slide, what we want to do is avoid the strategies that don't work. And here is some evidence about how effective different strategies are. So we can see at the bottom, the rereading very, very low, up to practice testing. Now it says self-testing or using past exam questions. Now, my problem with that is that students tend to just go straight to that. And that's at the end of the journey. Once you have got the information, paid attention and practice. So you have to be slightly careful with that. So just looking at how effective it is. But if we're going to now look at what the strategies are that you can use in the classroom, what you can teach them. So let's look at the next slide. So the strategies, for example, we talked just before about the reading. So the kind of 3R method with reading you can do, but read, recall, review. So you read a portion of the course materials, put the notes aside, and then review by writing or sketching what you remember. Go back to the new notes and review them. Check for accuracy and see what you've missed. Highlighting tends to be ineffective because students, I'm sure this is no surprise, either highlight far too much or too little, and then they just don't recall it. They think they're being active, but they're not. So let's look at what does work next. If we look at the next slide. So being active with revising and learning is the most important part. So passive reading, passive highlighting won't work. We think in pictures, and research tells us that the number of pictures recalled will be significantly greater than the number of words recalled. So this experiment was designed to investigate the effect of pictures versus words on memory recall. And if I said the word table, you would most likely think of a table. If I said the word house, you'd think of your house more than the actual word itself. So making things very visual is helpful. Obviously condensing the notes down from something that's quite big down to something that is more manageable, helps with the volume, as long as you're then doing something actively with the notes. We talk about a picture painting 1,000 words, because we do remember visual details and images much more quickly as well. So the type of picture and image depends on what it is that we're trying to learn, and we'll cover this in more depth when we look at the dual coding in a minute. So on the next slide, there are some examples of just some active revision there where attention has been paid. It is visual, and it's how thought and processing have occurred, and shows some rehearsal of the information. So here we've got someone who's kind of practicing some of the maths, and certainly with maths you do just want to practice. Here we've got some very kind of visual mind maps, not just the words. We've got flashcards, we've got a lot of colour, we've got images, so all of those are quite helpful approaches. So on the next slide we look at dual coding. And dual coding is very helpful. So on the left-hand slide, this comes from the website The Learning Scientists. And if you go on there, they've got a lot of helpful posters or infographics for students to show about revision, all evidence-based. And here, this one is about combining images and words, because it's a very powerful way to remember information. Lots of different types of visuals that can be used. So labeling, label diagrams, graphic organizers, infographics, mind maps, illustrated timelines, cartoon strips. It doesn't really matter what the image is. It depends on what it is, of course, you're trying to learn. Dual coding doesn't mean any sort of visual. It's about taking the time to understand how the verbal explanation connects with the visual explanation provided. Now, I'm going to show you an example. My daughter had exams at the moment, and she was trying to remember something that wasn't kind of sticking in her head. So we did some very untechnical, this isn't it, holding it up on the camera. Oh, you won't be able to see it because of the screen. Anyway, so what we did was we took the information that she just couldn't remember, and made it very silly and visual with some words, just drew things that would stick in her head. Absolutely no artist am I, but that's not the point. It was about being kind of silly, funny. How do we do it so that she could then just recall it when she needed to. So that's dual coding. If we look at the next slide, another thing that what we'll do now is have a little bit of a go. So we're going to try and make some kind of visual, vivid link for these concepts. So I don't speak German, maybe some of you do. The German for headache, Kopfschmerzen. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce it. So either how would you try and remember that, or how would you try and remember an electron is a subatomic particle with a negative charge? So I want you just to have a think about that. How would you draw that? How would you make that visually impactful, that you would then come back and go, oh yeah, I will remember that? So just have a think for a moment. What would you do there? And I will show you an example I have done earlier. So I'm sorry for the German speakers. Kopfschmerzen. Here we have a cop with a headache. He's got the hen, Kopfschmerzen, got the hen on his head. He's saying merci with the Merzen. So there, I've got the hen, the cop, the mercy, and they put them together, and he's got a headache. So Kopfschmerzen would be my way of thinking, oh yeah, cop, hen, mercy, there we go. It's silly, it makes no sense, but actually the kind of the funnier, the sillier, the ruder that the students make it, the more they're likely to remember. Here we've got the electron, there's the kind of image of it with and we've got the atomic bomb, it's subatomic, where the electron would be, might help them remember there. So it's that kind of thing that can be quite helpful with the visuals, and getting your students to just try that is it can be quite lengthy if you're doing that for everything, but for the tricky bits that really don't seem to make sense, and maybe the quite abstract bits, it can be very helpful. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So you're probably all familiar with the Ebbinghaus curve of forgetting. It's been around a very, very long time. On to the next slide, please, Malia. So he studied memory a very long time ago and found, as is unsurprising, memories weaken over time. If we learn something new, but then make no attempt to relearn it, we remember less as the days and hours and weeks go on. That the biggest drop in retention happens soon after learning it the first time, and this is reflected by the steep fall at the start of the forgetting curve. And without reviewing or reinforcing our learning, our ability to retain the information plummets. That it's easier to forget, it's easier to remember things that have meaning. So, I mean, he was trying to remember nonsense syllables, and obviously that was meaningless, so he forgot. The more meaning that something has for a student, obviously the more that they will remember it, the more engaged they are, the more exciting, the more they remember. Again, nothing groundbreaking there. The way that something is presented affects learning. Again, more if it's organized and logical and clearly presented, you're going to remember that much more than a scribbled shopping list. And how you feel also has an important part in to play in memory. If you're very stressed, you're not sleeping, that also creates a bit of a vicious cycle. And obviously the more stressed you are, the less you may sleep, which we will just talk about briefly at the end. So going back and reviewing, really quite important. If we go on to the next slide, spaced practice is very important. So this is about picking up and going back over things, so that we don't fall into the trap of just doing it once and then forgetting. It's a little bit like athletes who space out their practice. They don't expect to just practice the night before. Musicians don't expect to go on stage having just one rehearsal the night before. So, you know, telling our students that they, like athletes, like musicians, need to keep practicing if they want to do their best. And one example is that people might try to remember new names at a party. So they might kind of use it a few times while they meet this person, and then they've probably forgotten in the next week or the next month. So it's about how long they do it over time. There was research about 10 maths problems. One group did it 1 week, and they did 10 maths problems in 1 week. Another group did 5 1 week, 5 in the next. The group who did the 10 problems did better in the very short term because they'd done more, but a month later they achieved much less than the ones who'd spaced out their learning over a longer time and done it over 2 weeks. It's about that desirable difficulty. And reminding our students that learning, we don't want learning to be too easy, because if it's easily learned, it's easily forgotten. And that when learning is more challenging, that's when we see it going more into the long-term memory. And that's what we're looking for. On to the next slide is a very nice, easy way to, I'll put in a video to show this, but it's a very quick retrieval practice. It's asking your students to flash forward by simply asking them one thing they want to remember 10 years from now. So why are these prompts effective? So you can, you can ask them, why was it important to you? Why did it stand out to you? What's one thing that was surprising or confusing, or one thing that I didn't ask you? So it obviously, this links, it's a bit of a time saver. This one's very easy, can be used over subject areas. It can be used all age ranges. It's very customizable, and hopefully helps them to just kind of elaborate, and that ability to elaborate their own thinking is really important. It's an evidence-based strategy that takes retrieval practice to the next level. If they're really talking about it, elaboration is really important. That's part of why flash forward is quite helpful. So there's a very short video of some students who are just talking about what they really would like to remember in 10 years' time. Okay, so we'll go on to the next strategy, which is retrieval practice. So I suggest you go on to www.retrievalpractice.com, which is a fabulous website for retrieval ideas and resources. Lots in there that you can just kind of download and use, or also some ideas. Students are often worried about cramming information into their heads, but then often don't focus on getting the information out again. And it's the getting the information out again, or retrieval, that is a really powerful way to learn, and involves kind of any task that you've previously learned. So, and it's particularly effective because it produces durable long-term learning, and therefore a much more efficient way than studying, as they won't need to do so much later. So lots of ways of retrieving: writing out everything you know, then going back and filling in a different color, using flashcards, creating concept maps from memory. And I think somebody's been talking about memory mind maps on there as well. And some people love them, some people hate them, but a really good way to then just do it. Studying in groups, asking each other questions, using practice quizzes, practice tests, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with all the kind of online ones like, I've now forgotten the names, but Quizlet and Gojimo and Memrise and things like that. And there is another video that, again, I will put into the chat shortly. So if we go on to the next slide, it is about the power of a brain dump. So it is asking them just to stop what they're doing and write down absolutely everything that they can remember. So kind of retrieve everything in a 5-minute brain dump. And it's one of the kind of simplest switches you can get about change from going from information in to getting information out. And it should helpfully kind of reduce some anxiety, increase confidence, improve their metacognition, and just boost their memory a bit. That's what the research says. So we can see that it works. And because we know that, easy learning leads to easy forgetting. So we want to do these retrieval sessions, kind of free recall, it's called, or brain dump. Again, there's another video there that I could put in. So you just hand some blank paper to the students and go through, basic instructions, write down everything you can. It's ungraded, use any format, give them 5 minutes to write. No need to follow up, just simply then kind of launch into your review session as planned. And they can add anything in there at all. Obviously, doesn't matter about spelling, punctuation, anything like that. Some people like to use a timer, and there's a kind of radial 5-minute timer some people like to do. Some people like to do think, pair, share afterwards, which is quite nice as well. So that's the think bit, and then they'll combine with their partner, talk about that. Was there anything else? And then they'll share that with another pair as well. So that's another way of doing it. Sometimes having those earlier in the school year, so they're aware of kind of where they're at, and then kind of recall again at the end, and what was different from the first to the last. Keeping hold of their paper that they had, initial brain dump, end of topic brain dump there as well. And just so that they can have a look at home, what is it that, what can you do in 5 minutes? So if we go on to the next slide, because we haven't got the video, we'll just look at elaboration, which I started to talk about. And that's about asking why something is true. So if it's a particular concept is true, provide the answer. So by talking it through, by teaching, that's the bit that will really help students to kind of understand where the gaps are and help them make links that they may not already have. Again, you can see the infographic coming from the learning scientist on the right hand side. The images there, so we've got a very detailed color picture there, very elaborate, much easier to remember than the kind of black and white image. So you want as much detail, you want students to elaborate. Something that another technique for older students is what's called teach the duck. Now, here we have a rubber duck, but we might want to use a potato. So what I've done is drawn a little face on. You can use anything, a stone or anything that your students might want to bring in, and that's what they're going to teach. So if you'd like to name my mini potato, you're very welcome to put that into the messages there, and that will be who I'm teaching my strategies. So your students can then have their stone with a face or potato or whatever it is, and by then kind of teaching the duck or any other object, you are having to explain and elaborate something with a face, and it feels slightly less weird that you're doing it when you've got your friend with a face or picture even, than if you were just doing it to space. So that's what that is about. We go on to the next slide. Another way of another kind of quite powerful, very old memory is the memory palace technique. It's usually credited to the Greek poet Simonides, who was born about 500 BC. So as with all these myths, we'll probably take it with a little grain of salt, but the story was that there was a big reception for noblemen, and he was chanting a long poem, and he left the banquet hall, and its roof collapsed, killing everybody inside, and the bodies were mangled beyond recognition. But Simonides remembered where they were all sitting and was able to identify who was there, which gave him the idea of the memory palace, because each person had been sitting in a particular place or lying in a particular place. And the word place in Latin is locus. So Loci, so it's the method of Loci. So what we do is we think about where something is. So it's a kind of method of Loci as well. So the trick is that you have a place that you know really well, for example, your house or a school or a walk, and you think about what it is that you want to remember, and you imagine that thing there. So I'm going to walk into my house, and I want to remember. I mean, I'll just do some items: an apple, a banana, an orange, and a potato, and I will imagine them on each on certain bits of certain places in my house. And then when I will practice that and practice that they're there, I'll identify these specific places, and then what you do is you then kind of go back, and in the exam you go, aha, right, I'm walking in my house, and I remember I walked in and there was the apple on the chair and the banana on the table and the potato on the floor, and then you can recall these slightly bizarre images to mind, kind of write it down, and then you can recall it. So you do that. I mean, it was a kind of favorite of the ancient Greeks to remember things, and people do that now as well. So it's one of the oldest mnemonic tricks actually for memory, and people use it to remember massive long lists of things as well. So it's just quite a useful way to remember large amounts of information. I ask students, right, think of a very familiar walk you have. And what are all the key things we're going to remember, and what are you going to see on a gate, on a bus stop, on everything that's there. And so when they're imagining, they can just recall it. If we have a think, another one, mnemonics can be useful at times, because they chunk information together. So, for example, in an essay subject, if students want to remember a lot of information, again, a silly, rude or funny mnemonic with lots of information in, they write it down, and they can just retrieve a lot of information at the time. So it's all to do with condensing, writing it down, remembering it, going in, and then they can recall it. So I wouldn't overdo mnemonics, but they certainly have their place as well. On to the next slide. So all the strategies have got one thing in common, which is that students have to use them in order for them to work. Obvious, I know. And in other words, they have to be motivated to change their study habits from perhaps just reading and rereading if they want to see results. And a final bit of research I'll talk about is that one of the most important parts of motivation is about believing in yourself, what we call self-efficacy, not self-efficacy, which is what I've just said, which is the belief in your ability to do something in a given situation. So if they feel confident in their study habits that they will result in higher exam scores, they're more likely to put the effort in knowing it's going to pay off. If they don't feel so confident, they are less likely to study so much and maybe then go for these alternative strategies, or the malpractice we've been talking about. So in terms of increasing self-efficacy, we think about previous successes, what has worked, and the fact that it did, talking to other people who've been successful, being through it too, seeking out social support, telling yourself you can achieve your goal, and keeping your psychological state as positive as possible. Sleep acts a bit like a brain organizer. The analogy is that before you go to bed, there are files all over the room. And when you go to bed, it kind of gets tidied and organized for you. So sleep is a really helpful part of revision. Cramming and not getting the sleep is one of the most unhelpful parts. So you do want to, as well as, exercise and healthy eating as well. Very important. And however, so we go on to the next slide. There are times when that students do get quite panicky. So it is kind of breathing, relaxation, distraction. I'm just going to talk about 3 approaches that I sometimes help students with. One is the kind of five finger technique. So you start by start at the bottom of the finger. You breathe as you go. Breathe as you go to the top, and breathe out as you go down to the bottom. Breathe in as you go to the top, out as you go to the bottom. In as you go to the top, out as you go to the bottom. So if you just have a little practice with that, there's a kind of mild sensory feeling while increasing the breathing as fingers get longer in the middle, and you want to lengthen the breathing out as much. Another breathing strategy is box breathing. So drawing a box in the air or on the table or on their lap. So up the sides as they breathe in, holding it as they go along, breathing out as they go down, and just trying to lengthen it. So holding, breathing in as they go up, holding it, breathing out. And the idea with breathing is that you want it to slow down if they're panicking, and it's the long out breath that's really important there. In for a count of 5, out for a count of 9, or even in for a count of 7, out for a count of 11 if possible, but you want the long out breath. A third approach is a adaptation of the Ericksonian anxiety technique, which uses grounding. So really focusing on where you are right now, not letting your thoughts race. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. There's another thing that can just help students feel a little bit if they're beginning to panic. If we go on to the next slide, a tiny amount of the evidence is there if anyone is interested. If you look on retrievalpractice.org, you'll find a lot. I think you just take it from me that these are all evidence-based practices for you to try, for your students to try and see what they feel that they like. If we go on to the next slide, the basic principles are that we remember when we pay attention and are deeply engaged. We remember when we experience a thought that's colourful and meaningful to us. And there aren't shortcuts. Memory strategies work because they force you to work and engage in a level of processing that you don't normally do. So from me and my potato and my rubber duck, thank you very much. Off to Malia.
Thank you, Alice. So it's my turn now. Let me just turn on my camera. Okay, so having seen some lovely strategies that Alice has just shared, and it was lovely to see all those, and I'm sure most of those have been tried in your classroom already by yourselves. We apologize that we couldn't share the videos, but all the links would be provided. The ones who were questioning around would the links would be shared. So yes, they would be going through. And if you've been tracking the chat box, then Bami has been posting most of the links, but we will add those links to the slides, and the slides would be shared with you at the end. The other thing that I just wanted to emphasize is that we would really appreciate if you put all your questions into the Q&A chat box, and be patient, because right at the end of the session, we will be having a Q&A session where all your questions would be addressed. So having said that, the downside, we couldn't share the videos, but the upside is that we may be finishing off early. So if I could just start with my part. So I'm Maliha Athar Rashid. I'm one of the volunteers for AfriKindness, and what my part today would be to introduce a framework which is quite linked to what Alice has just shared, which is quite linked to what Lovett has just highlighted in terms of exam malpractice. So if we look at these questions, excuse me. So if we look at these questions that are there on the screen, where do we start? So we have had strategies that were shared by Alice, which were things that can be immediately introduced into your classroom. And as we are saying, they may have been a part of your classrooms already. So these are long-term strategies, fewer are immediate strategies. What I'm sharing here is a complete framework which highlights a long-term plan that schools can adapt depending on their resources, which could be teachers, which could be material, which could be the environment of the school. So where do we start is something that I'm trying to share here with the help of a whole framework. And secondly, we will try and address who's the most prone population that may get involved in exam malpractice. So we have a framework which is called Social and Emotional Learning Framework, which is commonly known as SEL. I'm not trying to, or in fact, this whole training is not trying to mitigate any malpractice policy that exists in Nigeria. All we are trying to do is to suggest ways in order to address exam malpractice at grassroots level, policies and how things can be changed in your own educational environment is something that you may be needing to address within your own capacities. So if we look at social and emotional learning, oh, I've gone too fast. Let me just bring this away. So if we try and define social and emotional learning, it is the process through which individuals acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. Now, if you look at the definition, it's not clearly or it's not directly linked to exam malpractice, but it has elements of it which could be addressed if this framework is applied in our classrooms. So what if we look at the definition back again, we have keywords like acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and it addresses the attitude to develop healthy identities, so possibly making the right choices, manage emotions like anxiety, and achieve not just personal but collective goals. Now, one of the things that we observe around us is that examination and achieving a good grade becomes such a personal thing for an individual, be it at the individual level or in terms of a family, that they try making it personal rather than a collective goal. So the element of sharing and considering achieving better in exam should be considered as a collective achievement rather than individual. So having said that, the last bit is supportive relationships and making responsible and caring decisions. That again is how ethical we tend to make our students, children, in terms of making the right choices when it comes to examination. So if we look at the framework in detail, it includes 5 areas, which is self-awareness, which could include things like recognizing one's emotion and values, as well as one's strengths and challenges. So it's absolutely fine having activities around which can address an individual learner to identify his strengths and, on the other hand, identify the challenges or possibly the areas that need further development. That's what all this framework suggests. Then we have responsible decision-making in the blue box there, making ethical constructive choices about personal and social behavior. Possibly this might be linked to examination malpractice. Relationship skills, forming positive relationships, working in teams, dealing with effectively with conflict. So now that's another thing that we want our learners. We're not just preparing them for the exam, we're preparing them for the world outside. So challenging situation, working out conflicts is something that this framework is suggesting. I'll be shortly sharing what kind of activities could be associated to that. The other bit that we have is social awareness, showing understanding and empathy for others, where you are willing to help others, you're willing to share things as you have those goals as collective goals rather than individual goals. Self-management, managing emotions and behaviors to achieve one's goals. That's something that we already have discussed here. Now, why are we sharing, or why are we suggesting this framework to be incorporated in our system? Because we have this already in the schools of UK, and there is enough research that suggests that it is effective in bringing up student experience and improving students' performance. So this was a study that was shared in the Education Policy Institute UK, where Durlach and his colleagues, who conducted a meta-analysis of somewhere around 213 schools who implemented social and emotional learning programs, involving somewhere around, so it's a big number of students that were involved. It is more than 270,000 kindergarten and secondary school students, and they assess the impact of social and emotional learning in their entire journey of the school. So it is a longitudinal process. It can't be, the study is longitudinal. It definitely lasted for a long time. So the findings, if you see on the visual there, the bar graph is clearly indicating the skills that were focused. So we have skills, academic, social behavior, emotional distress, attitude, and conducting problems. So the dark bar is clearly indicating places where addition of cell program was introduced. And then you can see how that has positively impacted the percentage of student performance in various skills. Similarly, if you see academics was also improved, social behavior, emotional distress and attitude, all of those areas have definitely shown a positive result by the introduction of social and emotional learning. So based on this, what we would suggest, let me just go back. We have suggested activities that could be included, such as where they have to make ethical choices while given a problem. Like, for instance, they are on an island, they have to pick 10 most important things to let them last for, let's say, 3 days or 5 days, and they have to work that out in a group. Similarly, they might have other things to work on. So we can have activities related to social and emotional learning, from most simple to the most complex ones. And another example that I can think of, a simple one, is showing them a video and asking them reflective questions at the end. So thinking about why were the protagonist acting the way they did. So it could be the hero, or it could be the villain. So why do you think the villain may have acted this way? So we're not judging someone for their acts, but they're trying to think about what might be the things that have contributed towards such kind of a behavior. So they're thinking all outside the box rather than just seeing and believing in what they see in the video, or a video clip, or a scenario. So those are the kind of things that this framework suggests. In terms of a complicated one, it could be going out and doing some community work involving the school, or possibly within the school. So those are the kind of things that would definitely contribute towards making the right choices, being empathetic. So if we look at the association of exam malpractice towards social and emotional learning, we say that it will help making ethical decision making. It will increase empathy in our students. They will be able to self-regulate, and then again, making responsible decision, as I've already shared. This would help them in relationship skills and their coping mechanism. So that's something that we wanted to share at this point as a long-term plan. But let me just remind you that we are not suggesting any policy here. This is just a longitudinal program that can be introduced in any school, any setting within their own capacity. But please be mindful that it has to be a continuous integration into the curriculum. It shouldn't be a one-off session, like you have one-off session doing problem solving in the first term, and then you probably have it in the last. It should be something that is integrated either in the curriculum or having regular sessions throughout. So now the entire idea behind this was that we Afrikindness are working on this whole training on social and emotional learning, and we would be detailing out the plan plus the activities that schools could use. Now, if this idea interests you, we're more than happy for you to contact us, and then we would be engaging once the training is about to be delivered. So the other thing that I wanted to highlight was that if someone could just put the email in the chat box, so anyone interested could contact us. All right, so here I have the last bit. It seems like as if, so if you could just respond to these questions here, that would be lovely. I think my part is done. We'd shortly be getting into the Q&A. And once the Q&A is done, we would be winding up the training. So if you could just be kind enough to put your responses in the chat box, that would be lovely. Okay.
We've got few responses coming in, so we can read that out, Malia.
Yeah. So there are effective strategies for mitigating against exam malpractice. Thank you for sharing that, Flora. No, that was someone else, I guess. That's gone up. So using picture images is helpful in learning and studying to retain knowledge. That's very helpful, Flora. Grace says the possibility to work on myself as well as my student. So are you trying to suggest with the possibility of the strategies that were shared? If that's the case, yes, absolutely. How to involve SEL in our lessons. If you are interested in finding out more, that's what I just shared, and I think we have already shared the link to Afrikindness. If you wanted to get involved, then please email on that address, and we will be in touch with you as soon as we have a plan for delivering the SEL training for the teachers. Involving pictures and videos in lessons, yes, those are very helpful, but at times what has been observed is that videos and pictures are just shared for the sake of killing time. I don't want to be very rude, but unless there is some form of involvement or engagement targeted, that's when the idea of sharing a video or a picture is fulfilled. So we have to be very mindful of when introducing those, that what is the purpose? What are we trying to gain? Is there a learning outcome that can be associated to that? It's really necessary to imbibe the SEL in our teaching learning. Absolutely, that's what we are suggesting, and we have evidence, and that was the reason why we shared evidence from an organization in the UK which highly supports introducing SEL in a teaching and learning environment. Another comment is SEL framework. Sorry, I missed that. I have to scroll up. Okay. SEL framework is very good strategy to prevent examination malpractice. Yes, be mindful that we are not saying that there is a direct link, but we could find a link if we have that embedded in our curriculum. That's what we are suggesting. This is a long-term implementation of a plan to see the outcome of it. And there are very few studies to suggest. So the one I shared is one of those, which I found was authentic enough to be utilized, and that was the reason we shared it. But if you are planning to introduce a SEL program in your school environment, you may not see the results for a while. It will take longer than expected, and that's something that we would be sharing in the training as well, how and when we should be hoping to get results after implementing the SEL program. Yes, pictures and video will make a couple of importance of including SEL. Okay, so I think I've responded to that, including KSI in our lessons as well. Okay, thank you. Yes. So thank you so much. If you, I'll just repeat that. If you are interested in SEL, please email us and we will get in touch with you once we are ready to deliver the training around SEL. And it could be just you as individuals, or it could be your institution as well. So thank you. What's next? So we have the Q&A now. So we have had a few questions. What I'll do is I'll read the questions out, and the most appropriate person who was talking around that can actually respond to those questions. So give me a minute. Let me just pull out those questions for myself. So we have 5 questions so far. We encourage you to put your questions here, because we would be, and of course the chat is there. But once we have your questions here, we'll be addressing those. So the first question that we have was from Bankies, and said, what is NAP doing to openly discipline members who engage in exam malpractice so that it serves as deterrence to others? Now, I would be reminding you that we are not highlighting any policy or any steps that could be taken at the system level or the educational organizations. That's something that they need to address themselves. We are just providing strategies that our learners could benefit from, and definitely seeing the results in the exams or possibly in their own lives. So, anyone, the person who's posed this question, we are not in a position to respond to that. Thank you.
Okay. can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So thanks so much for dropping that question, Olushula. Yes, I have taken up that question and I have sent that question to the NAPS president and to the NAPS leadership. So I will be requesting that they formally, engage all their educators as regards to what they're doing in respect to this exam malpractice within the institution. So I've messaged the NACS president, and I'm hoping that they would give a response either by email or through one of your sessions in NAPS. Thank you.
All right. Can I move on to the next one, Bibi?
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is regarding dual coding. So I would ask Alice to respond to that. So there are a series of questions related to that. So Sarah says, does dual coding, when it is used frequently, apart from for send, making our pupils lazy, especially when it is used for retrieval? She further says, also, we are trying to build our people skills and make them ready to live in the society and work. Will they have dual coding in life and work? Would you like to respond to that, Alice? You're mute, Alice. Let me unmute you. Just give me a second.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the first bit about, does dual coding make them lazy? No, because they're actively having to make some visuals and connect it to the words. So no, because it's an active thing that they have to do. We can help them with it, but no, it's an active technique they have to do. So no, it doesn't make them lazy. It's the idea is it's there to help them remember. It's about making those connections in their brain. So I'd say absolutely not there. It's how can we help them to learn more and achieve more. And the second bit was, I believe, Malia, was it we're trying to help them to be in society. It's just one strategy to help them learn and recall. So it's I'm not sure it's really got huge links to kind of being in society, other than it's going to help you learn a bit of information and recall it. I don't think it's going to be the most life-changing thing that's going to teach you how to be in the world, but it's just one strategy to help remember things, for to revise, to learn. I'm not sure I've answered the whole question. There was quite a lot there.
I can see that Sarah has put in the chat box. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I can see Lovett's hand is up. So Lovett, do you want to add anything?
Yes, please, Malika, if that's okay. Now, language teachers use dual coding a lot in our lessons. Now, like in Alice's session, when she talked about the Kopfschwesen, the German word, and then she talked about electron and drawing pictures. So we use pictures to explain key concepts. And what we have found out is that using that method actually makes our classroom and our lessons inclusive, that children with SEND or EAL students are able to cope with languages better because we're including them in our lessons. Now, when they see the pictures, we get them to start thinking about what the lesson is going to be about, but we also get them to retrieve and recall what they learned previously and see if they can make the connection with the new learning using pictures. Now, we find out in languages that using pictures has actually been an effective tool for us to engage the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your additional comments. Love it. So we have the next question from Techno Spark. What are the warning signs or red flags of potential examination malpractice? Can I ask Lovett if you could respond to that? Do we have any red flags to associate those to exam malpractice coming through?
Sorry, Malia, could you repeat the question again for me?
What are the warning signs or red flags of potential examination malpractice?
It's a very loaded question, I must say. So, because if you're talking about the red signs, to flag up exam malpractice, again, it depends on each context. Now, I cannot remove culture from this, from my response to this, because when you look at the culture around you, what is acceptable in the culture? Is it acceptable to receive gifts from parents? I talked about parental involvement. And the research I cited talked a lot about parental involvement in directly or indirectly aiding exam malpractices. Now, if the culture is such that, yes, parents can give us gifts and we're expected to return in any manner, shape, or form, then that is a culture that needs to change. That is already a red flag there. So we start with the school culture, the culture we have built and allowed and tolerated in our system. And that's on the side of the culture. Then we look at our students. Are we becoming too familiar with them? Where are the boundaries in terms of our relationship with them? Are they having expectations of us to actually leak exam questions to them? Or that's a red flag for us as well, for us to be mindful of. Again, acting in a very professional manner all the time in a relationship with all stakeholders. So we have to be very observant. I talked about training invigilators again and training staff for staff to be aware of the guidance and conduct laid out by the professional body. If they are not aware, they may not even realize that their actions contravene the guidance and the regulations of the professional body, and so can be construed as exam malpractice. They have to be aware. They have to know what those regulations are. And it's not like we want them to start tiptoeing. No, but it's just about them being careful and vigilant. The same thing with invigilators. So those red flags for me would depend on the setting, but there are some key pointers for us to be aware of. Our relationship with parents, our relationship with staff, our relationship with others as well, but also making sure that we have put in place effective training to support our staff, to engage our parents with our parents and give them the vital information they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We move on to the next question. Would the various slides, okay, yes, of course, we will be sharing the slides, so don't worry about that. Slides along with the video links as well. So we have another question. What are the common types of examination malpractice and samples? Love it.
Okay, the common types of exam malpractice, again, it goes to this setting. Like the paper I cited by Okoli and others, they talked a lot about bribery, fraud. They talked about teachers selling exam papers to students at university level. At secondary school level, they talk about teachers divulging exam information to students in lessons. Because these teachers are also not just examiners, but they are involved in creating the exam questions, which we know according to guidance that we should abstain from doing. So there are so many, it comes in various forms and shapes and scopes depending on your area and on your setting. But a prevalent one in the Nigerian context is what Okoli and his colleagues highlighted about bribery. Okay, receiving gifts from parents and from, but again, there are so many ways of, and then of course in the examination room, talks about giraffing. Somebody mentioned giraffing in the chat, teachers giraffing and pointing out answers to students in the exam room. That shouldn't be happening. Giraffing shouldn't be happening. Okay, and then when we have students, sometimes we have to have students in small rooms due to medical conditions, underlying medical conditions or anxieties, and they have what we call here extra time. The invigilators actually aid and abet exam malpractice by not just reading out exam questions to them, but insinuating answers, which we shouldn't be doing. We should be mindful of that. Again, when it comes to, well, I've talked about extra time, students receiving extra time. The scribers, sometimes we have readers and scribers. The readers are meant to read out the exam question. That is it. You don't add your opinion to it. You don't add your judgment to it or your understanding. Let the student interpret it the way they want and answer the questions. The scribers, we are scribing for the students because they are allowed under exam conditions. They've gone through the process. They have medical evidence to prove that. So schools are allowed to give them scribers. So the scribes, when they're scribing for the students, ensure you're scribing exactly what the child is dictating to you, not adding your own opinion or your own views to their answer. So those are things we have to be mindful of. And again, it's all down to training and unpicking them. Teachers, I am sure teachers in your context will have many more examples than I have just cited. So again, it's about working as a school community to find out exactly how exam malpractices occur in our school environment, and then how can we deal with that as a school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lovett. Unless someone still has a question, we don't have any more questions in the list. So we'll give a few seconds while I'm moving on to the next slide. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A or the chat box, and we are more than happy to respond. So what we have next is our lovely Lovett is going to give us a closing to this training. And yeah, over to you, Lovett.
Thank you so much, Maliha. Thank you. I'd like to say a huge and massive thank you to everyone, to NAPS, the president of NAPS, the board of trustees, Africoiners, Bumi and Maliha, Alice coming on board as well, and Sophia, even though she's not here with us today. I must say thank you also to Victory International and Palmer, who introduced me to Africoiners as one of her participants, the Confident Executive Leadership Program. Thank you so much to the participants for giving up your Saturday morning and attending this session, this workshop, loaded with information. Alice's session, I couldn't stop scribbling notes. As a teacher, strategies I recognize and new strategies I'm going to implement. For example, the power of a brain dump. My goodness, pausing my lesson. I am all about AFL and hinge point questions during the lesson, but pausing my lesson and asking my students to note down what they have remembered from what I have just taught them. It's actually about supporting them to get information into their long-term memory where they're able to recall it. Because when it stays at a short-term memory, we know they will not remember it after a period. So a very useful session. I want to encourage all of us to please go over Alice's session again. Really useful strategies for classroom practice and for us to implement in our school setting as funding allows us, as resources allow us, and as time permits us in our school settings. I know how challenging our settings can be, and we're always having to shuffle things around and mitigate against many conditions and circumstances. But whatever we can implement to support our students, to build that self-regulatory skills in them, and to support them in becoming independent learners, but to help them to become the whole child. That the focus shouldn't just be on the certification, but on building skills in them, effective skills in them, to help them to revise. Revision shouldn't start when they are at the last year, in year 11, or however this is in SS3. Revision should start from the start, from JS1. In fact, go down to primary school, stitching them bits and then building on that, building on that, building on that as they grow older, okay, up to university, inculcating that culture of integrity in our teachers, in our students, and working effectively with our parents. So thank you so much. Thank you for attending today's session, and we look forward to more events. If you haven't subscribed to AfriKindness, I'll encourage us to please go on the website and subscribe so we can be notified of when there are future events for us to attend. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lovett. So that's us. So I'll just hand over to Bumi for the next bit that is left.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to Alice for that wonderful strategies that she shared, that I am so sure all our educators and teachers on the call will be taking on board into their different classrooms and implementing. Look, I appreciate our teachers so much. You all do a fantastic job in getting students, children, preparing them for the future, and bringing up the right attitude and behavior is also part of learning, ensuring that our students have the right skill sets to prepare them to be people, good citizens, productive citizens, is quite very essential. So there is a lot of work on our hands, and I'm so sure the strategies that we've picked up today, we will take that into our respective classrooms and also share with all the teachers and educators in our network. Thank you to Malia for that wonderful introduction into social and emotional learning. We will be writing to every teachers on the platform on our call today and sharing more about the plan that we've got specifically for teachers in Nigeria. So watch this space. We will be back with more information as regards to the plans we've got for social and emotional learning. And we currently, like Malia did say, we're currently looking for volunteers who can support us. So if you're interested in supporting us through this whole process of equipping ourselves as teachers and educators to be the best version and to really hold that educational platform in place, please write to us at info@afrikindness.org. There is a post-training survey that I've posted on the chat. Please take time to reflect on today's session, and please give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And just to say that that post-training survey is actually a requirement for us to send certificates out, because this training, we will be issuing our certificates. So for you, if you'd like to have certificates, please complete that training, that's post-training survey. I also want to extend my appreciation to our keynote speaker, Lovett Moye. You are fantastic. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us at AfriKindness today. She gave us a lot of information into exam malpractices, ethical behaviors, and the likes. And I'm so sure every of our educators on this platform have picked from our wealth of experience, and we'll be taking forward some of the strategies, some of the information that you've given to us today. I'm going to post that pre-training survey again. I'm going to post that in the comment section, so please feel free, go onto that post-training survey and complete it, please. Malia, please, next slide.
Can I just come back? There are people commenting in the chat box saying that the first question of the survey isn't working. Can we sort that out and repost it later on?
Okay, yes, I'll do that.
Perfect. So thank you. So the link is there. Please save that for later. We'll sort it out and see what might be the technical issue when reposted. Okay.
So like I did mention, we are in need of volunteers, specifically from Africa. So if you're interested, please do write to us at info@africans.org. Send us your CV. We're looking at getting on board on the social and emotional learning for teachers and equipping ourselves on this particular initiative. So please write to us. We are also creating content, African-based content, and we would really love to have some of you on board. So write to us with your CV and we'll take it up from there. Next slide, please. Yes, and lastly, I'd like to say, yep, we would love you to follow us on our different social media platforms. We're very active on social media, so feel free. I know we've got a couple of teachers on LinkedIn and Facebook that I've been interacting with. So thank you to everyone that has joined this training via LinkedIn. Thank you very much. We've been having a chat on LinkedIn, isn't it? So thank you so much for joining. If you're on Facebook, hello, hi, thank you so much for joining. And if you're on Twitter as well, thank you so much for joining. So please click on that subscribe button and follow us. We have a lot that we have in plan. Our team of educators have a lot in plan for the year. I think we have a children competition coming up, specifically for children in Nigeria. So watch out for that, because that information will be coming out soon. And that rounds up today's session. Thank you so very much, everyone. It's been an interactive one. Thank you. Thank you for all the comments and the questions that you've pulled through. We will send across the recordings for today's session. So you will get that. You'll get the recordings. And if you have further questions that you'd like to throw, that you'd like to send across, please feel free to email us and we'll pass that, your questions or your queries or whatever, we'll send it. We'll make sure we attend to it. Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for a lovely and a very interactive and informative session. So good to have everyone on a Saturday morning. And thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.